Hi, how are you? How's everyone? Today's Torah portion is Naso, which is in the blue art scroll Chumash. It's page 748. But if you have a different Chumash, you'll find it as the second Torah portion in the book of Numbers. I will tell you one interesting thing, and that is that in Israel they already read Naso this past Shabbat because they only observe one day Shavuos. So Friday was Shavuos, Shabbat they read the next Torah portion. We were celebrating Shavuos on Shabbat, so we read a special reading for Shavuot, and now we're going to read Naso this coming week. So we're off by 1 week with Israel, but we'll catch up eventually, and we'll realign ourselves with them. Second thing I want to tell you about Parshat Naso, which is interesting, is that it holds a record as the longest Torah portion, 176 verses, which makes it the longest Torah portion, the longest parsha. And we'll get to some of the reasons practically why it's the longest Torah portion. But I would like to start by saying that maybe because the theme of this week's Torah portion is so crucial and critical, and I think in today's day it's even more crucial and critical, that it's the longest Torah portion. What is the theme of this week's Torah portion? So you know that a Torah portion could have multiple subjects in it, but is usually we try to find the overarching theme that runs through the thread that runs through the whole Torah portion. So if you had to say, what is the theme of this week's Torah portion? So by looking at it, it's very hard to tell, because basically you have a number of Torah subjects in this Torah portion. The first subject you have in this Torah portion is the counting, the census of the Jewish people, but not the Jewish people on a whole, specifically the tribe of Levi. There were 3 children that Levi had, Gershon, Kahas, and Merari, and each one had different responsibilities in the tabernacle. And at the end of last week's Torah portion, which was Bamidbar, we spoke about the son of Kahas and his branch, his family, what their roles were. They carry the actual vessels on their shoulders. Now we come to the second son, which is Gershon, and they carry the curtains and its cover and the walls. And then the third son was Merari, and they carried the beams and the sockets and those objects. So we have the counting of from the age of 30 to 50, which was the age that the Levites would serve in the temple, of the 3 sons of the tribe of Levi, Kahas, Gershon, and Merari. It's not according to their age, because it was Gershon, Kahas, and Merari, but Kahas was counted first because he carried the actual vessels, the holiest objects. So that's subject number 1. After we finish that, the second primary subject of this week's Torah portion is the law of Sota. Now, this is it's something that was stopped after the Second Temple. It was abolished by Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. But in temple times, when a husband and wife suspected each other of infidelity, there was a method by which they could come to the temple, and the Kohen would erase the name of God into a liquid, give it to the woman to drink, and it would discern if she was faithful or not. And the goal, hopefully, was the woman says she's innocent. So by drinking it and being absolved, if she was guilty, then she would die as a result of drinking this formula. But if she was innocent, she would get blessings, and this would restore peace and harmony between the husband and wife. So clearly, this is a story that has a very practical moral lesson, and that is, our rabbis say that peace and harmony between a husband and wife is so vital and essential that God says, the only time that God says you could erase my name, usually it's a sin, it's a prohibition, it's a profanity to erase the name of God. But here God allows it for the sake of restoring harmony and peace between a husband and wife. So the first subject was the counting of the 3 sons of Levi. The second one is the Sota story, the woman who drinks the water to prove her fidelity to her husband. The third major subject in this week's Torah portion, I say major because there are a couple of minor things in between, but I'm talking about the major focus, is the law of a Nazir, a Nazarite. A Nazir is someone who takes an oath, takes a vow not to be holy. Okay, and a standard oath of holiness is 30 days, but you could take it for an extended time or even for a lifetime. Matter of fact, Torah this week is the story of Samson the Nazarite, who his mother was visited by an angel during a pregnancy and told that you're going to have a child that you're carrying in your womb, and from the womb, even pre-birth, he should not come into contact with alcohol and don't cut his hair because he's going to be holy to God. So this is a person who takes what you may call a vow of abstinence, not like we think of priests today that take a sexual vow of abstinence, but rather abstinence from worldly pleasures, symbolized by drinking wine or cutting the hair, which is personal grooming, which is pleasure. He's detached a little bit from the world. So that is the Nazir, third subject. Then we come to the fourth subject, which is the priestly blessing, something that we invoke every day in our daily prayers, the priestly blessing that the Kohanim are commanded to bless the Jewish people. And finally, the fifth subject, which is the bulk, and that's why practically it's such a long Torah portion, is that after the Jews erected the tabernacle on the first day of Nisan, for 12 consecutive days, each tribe brought gifts to the tabernacle to bring offerings on the altar, to dedicate the tabernacle and the altar. And so it lists the 12 days of successive gifts and dedication offerings that were given by each of the 12 tribes, and that takes us throughout the rest of the Torah portion. So again, we have 5 themes going on here. The first one is the counting of the sons of Levi. The second one is the laws of the Sota. The third one is the Nazir, the Nazarite, who takes a vow of abstinence of wine and being holy to God. The fourth one is the priestly blessing. And the fifth subject is the dedication of the gifts to the inauguration of the tabernacle. So the obvious question is 5 different subjects. What's the overarching theme of this week's Torah portion? And perhaps the theme of this week's Torah portion is about peace. Now, what's the clue? The clue is that the Nazarite story is talking about a couple that have fallen out of marital harmony, and they're now lacking trust in one another, and therefore the love and the peace in the home has been ruptured. We all know the term Shalom Bayit, and we're trying to restore, the Kohen is trying to restore harmony and peace in the home. So clearly that's the subject of peace. The priestly blessing is also a giveaway, because the last word, it's a climax, right? May God bless you and protect you. May he shine his countenance upon you and be gracious to you. And finally, may God lift his face towards you and grant you Shalom, peace. So the ultimate blessing of the priestly blessing is peace. So again, the second subject is also about peace. But what about the other 3 subjects? So the first subject we said was the counting of the 3 sons of Levi. Now, I mentioned that Kahas, who had the greatest privilege to carry the vessels itself, the ark, the menorah, the altar, on their shoulders. They were the most privileged, although they were not the oldest. They're counted separately in a previous Torah portion. And one of the reasons is because later on, we're going to find in the book of Bamidbar that the descendants of Kahas, namely Korach, led a rebellion against Moshe Rabbeinu and said, why are we only Levites? Why aren't we Kohanim like Aaron? Or why aren't we the leaders like you, Moses? And they accused Moses of being power hungry and taking the power for him and his brother Aaron and excluding them. And they said, we're entitled to more power. And the earth swallowed them up alive, serving as an eternal lesson that greed and hunger for honor and power leads to your self-destruction. So the idea of the different roles being assigned to the sons of Levite in this week's Torah portion, unlike Kahas and its members who went astray, Gershon and Merari remained loyal and accepting of God's roles and responsibilities that was designated to each one accordingly. And therefore, they represent peaceful acceptance of different roles in society led by different groups of people, and not quarreling over seeking greater self-importance the way Kahat and its members did, the tribe of Kahat, through their offspring, Korach. So therefore, in a sense, the counting of Gershon and Merari represents harmonious, peaceful coexistence. So that covers the first subject. What about the Nazir? So again, perhaps Nazir is also about peace. Why? Because we just said that God chooses certain groups within the Jewish people to have specific roles that are more sacred than others. And the question is, what about democracy? What about my rights to be who I want to be? Can I not be a Kohen? And the answer is no. If you're not born a Kohen, you can't be a Kohen. However, by abstaining, by taking the vow of a Nazir, you could be holy to God just like the Kohen. And this restores a sense of peace in the community, that you can voluntarily choose to be, so to speak, an honorary Kohen, holy to God, at least for a period of time or an extended period, or permanently if you so choose, that you could attain a status of holiness, again, facilitating peace and harmony in the community. So that covers the subject of Nazir. Of course, we said that the priestly blessing is all about Shalom at the conclusion. It's the ultimate peak of the blessing. And what about the 12 tribes bringing the successive gifts? Once again, that's harmony. Every tribe had their day in which they were able to bring offerings and dedicate the tabernacle. And furthermore, our rabbis say that they each brought identical gifts, to not try to outdo one another, but rather to show peaceful respect and coexistence and love. Sometimes people want to up the ante. If you brought this, I can do more than you. I can do better than you. I can raise myself above you. By each one bringing identical gifts, they showed their harmonious, peaceful relationship, that there was no envy, there was no strife, there was no competition. It was rather one for all for one. And so perhaps the overarching theme, and that's why I said it's so applicable today when we see America descending into violence and chaos, and man against man, brother against brother, sister against sister, society turning against itself. This Torah portion is very relevant and very applicable to our lives, of how the greatest blessings in life is peace, whether it's between a husband and a wife, like the story of the Sota, because after all, everything begins at home, whether it's between members of a tribe, like the sons of Levi and the Kohanim, whether it's amongst the Jewish people, like all the different 12 tribes bringing their gifts within one nation, or at society at large. We have to always maintain peace, because what our rabbis say, that the whole Torah was given for the sake of creating peace in the world. That's the whole intent, that's the whole purpose of the Torah. Lasot shalom ba'olam. And furthermore, our rabbis say, Lo matzah HaKadosh Baruch Hu kli machzik bracha Yisrael. God did not find a greater vessel to contain blessing for the Jewish people, Ela Shalom, only peace. Where there is peace, our rabbis say, the divine presence rests. Where there's conflict, the divine presence is banished, is exiled. And so therefore, to facilitate more blessing, there needs to be more peace and more harmony. And that again applies on an individual level, on a communal level, and a societal level. So very timely Torah portion, which is the subject of the Parsha, which is the theme, which is Shalom, which is peace. Now, I just want to point out that in Hebrew, the word Shalom, everyone says peace. We also use the word Shalom to say hello or goodbye. But I want to just point out something very powerful that you should try to remember always. That the word Shalom is actually much more than peace in the English sense. Peace, if you look it up in the dictionary, it basically means that two parties are not at odds with each other. They're living peacefully with each other. There's no conflict, there's no war. Two nations that are not at war are at peace. They may have nothing to do with each other. You may have two people, my neighbor, maybe I don't even know my neighbor's name. I never met the guy, or I don't talk to him. But I'm at peace with them. We're not fighting over our boundary. We're not fighting over our land. I have no issues with each other. But we call it peace because we're not fighting. The word shalom in Hebrew, what is the root of the word shalom? And we always have to remember this. The word shalom is from the word shalem, which means complete, whole. So take the body. It's a good example, your physical body. A healthy person has a body that all the organs are at peace with one another. God forbid the white cells are attacking the red cells. That's terrible. That's illness, right? When the body is harmonious, there's no conflict internally in the body. You don't have a tumor or a cancer cell attacking the body. There's peace. That's a healthy person. But is a healthy person just a person that doesn't have parts of their body that are in conflict with each other, attacking one another? No. Harmonious body is when the body is aligned and interconnected. So if my brain is not connected to my arm and I can't move my arm, they're not at odds with each other. They're just not wired up. They're not connected. They're not working in sync and in harmony. A healthy person is a balanced person, a person that their whole body physically is working harmoniously together, each one doing its part, each organ, each limb doing its part to facilitate the objective of the person, the will of the person, which is their drive, their ambition, their motivation, their soul. The same thing is with the world. We should never think of peace. Imagine a husband and a wife who live in two separate bedrooms. They don't talk to each other. They live in one house. Are they fighting? No, they're not fighting. No bad words are spoken. No bad deeds are done. Would you call that, oh, they have shalom bayit, they have peace in the house? Not only that, they don't even talk to each other. They don't even look at each other. Nobody would call that shalom bayit. Although they're not fighting, they're not at war with each other. They just have no interest in each other. They don't care about each other. They don't love each other. Shalom bayit is when each one is loving and caring and supporting the other. That's shalom. Why? Because it's shalom. They are completing each other. They're like two halves of a puzzle, two soulmates that complete and make each other whole. So we should understand this as well. Today, again, we're talking about unrest in America, lack of peace. Peace is not just that this community does what it needs to do and this community does what, and everyone lives their own personal, separate lives. Maybe the reason we're in this mess is because we had the wrong understanding of the word shalom. If we understand that shalom is that just like each part of the body cares about the rest of the body and facilitates the rest of the body, society has to be shalom. It has to be whole, which means not just that, oh, these people live in their neighborhoods, we live in our neighborhoods, we don't fight, we live in peace, we don't have anything to do with each other. No. Shalom means we help, because everyone has their strengths. Everyone has their areas of importance where they can play and facilitate a special role, just like parts of the body. The head can't do what the lungs could do, and the lungs can't do what the heart could do, and the heart can't do what the kidneys could do. And that's why they have to work together. So too in society, everyone has to work together. And this actually takes us to the very name of the Torah portion. The name of the Torah portion is Naso. And there's no word better than Naso to illustrate this idea. The word Naso has a literal meaning and a figurative meaning. The literal meaning is raise up the heads of the members of the family of Gershon. Figuratively, it means count them. Raise them up, meaning do a count. Now, we just came from the days of Sfirat Omer, which connected Passover to Shavuot. So we all know that the word for counting is lispor. So why here does it say naso, raise up, elevate? And here we have a very crucial, essential message the Torah is communicating to us. You see, when you count people like a census, and I know we're going through the 2020 census now, sometimes you get lost in numbers. It's sort of like today with the COVID-19, when you hear numbers, so many cases, so many hospitalizations, so many deaths, God forbid. And it's just a number. Tragically, the number is quite high. Thankfully, it's not as bad as it was during the Spanish flu and 20 million people died, but it's still thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people. But when you give a number, it's just like numbers. You forget that each number is a human life, is a person with a name, with a family, with a personality. And therefore, you could forget the individual because you're looking at the mass, the totality, as the term the masses. But what about the individual within the mass? So therefore, the Torah, when it talks about counting, it uses a very special word. The word it uses is naso, raise up. When you count people, you have to raise them up. You have to raise their spirit and let them know that they matter, they count. One of the slogans we're hearing today is Black Lives Matter. Torah is saying is every life matters. Why? Because the fundamental principle of Judaism, which is rooted in the book of Genesis, is that every single person is created in the image of God. Every single person is created in the image of God. And since every person is in the image of God, inherently, no human being is greater or more valuable than the next person. Doesn't mean that every person has the same potential. It doesn't mean that every person actualizes their potential the same way. We have free choice who we want to be and who we want to become. But our inherent value, which comes from our godly soul, is equal in every human being. Which means if you took everyone's soul out of their body and you lined up all of our souls are equal. And that's the meaning in our American Constitution when we say all men are created equal. You say, what do you mean? How could you say all people are created equal? There's vast differences amongst people in all different areas of life, including their IQs, their character, their social, economic, on and on and on. Talent, skills. No two people are identical. Everyone has their own fingerprint, but every person has their own soul print. Every person is unique, one of a kind, but also at the same time identical to every other person because we're all created in the image of one God. And that's one of the great contributions of monotheism, that because we're all in the image of one God, therefore we're all identical because there's only one God and we're all created in the image of that same God. As a matter of fact, from a very early age, when I would run into Christians and they would debate me, and they say, do you believe in Jesus? I said, yeah, he was a person, he lived. I know he was a human being. He was actually Jewish. But then they say, but he was the Son of God. Do you believe he was the Son of God? And I would say, of course he was the Son of God. But not only he was the Son of God, I'm also a son of God. You're also a son or a daughter of God. Every human being is a son or a daughter of God. And therefore, there's no difference between him and me and you. So the idea that every person is in the image of God is why the Torah says, raise up. Sometimes numbers can cause the individual to be lost. In other words, we as Jews believe in communal togetherness, interconnectedness between one and another, husband and wife, neighbors, love your neighbor as yourself. As we just talked about the body being interconnected, every part of the body has to be interconnected. In order to have shalom, in order to have completeness, wholeness, oneness, everyone has to be together. At the same time, nobody should lose their own individuality. Everyone has their own identity. And every person is as valuable, as important as the next person. And it doesn't matter race, color, skin, culture, creed, doesn't matter. Every human being on planet Earth is a child of God. And that's the message of Naso, to elevate. When you count them, don't just tell them they're a number. Make sure they know that they are elevated, because as the Talmud says, God made one human being, Adam, after the 6 days of creation. On the last day he made Adam. Why one human being? Not populations. Because God wanted to say, every person should say the whole world was created for me. If I was the only person on earth, God would have made the world for me, just like he did for Adam. No different. So on the one hand, the whole world was created for me. On the other hand, now that there are 7 billion people in this world, we have to not only respect one another, but we have to be humble enough to recognize that every human being is also that one person that the whole world was created for, just like the world was created for me. And therefore, the message of Naso is not only my importance as being a one and only child of God, and God loves me like an only child, but the next person has the same importance, and I have to respect and attribute the same importance to the next person as I do to myself. I want to talk about the priestly blessings a little bit, because the priestly blessings is something that, as I said, in Israel, the Kohanim actually give the blessings every day, just like it was done in the temple every day. But in our day and age, the Chazan recites it every day in his daily prayers. And so these are very important blessings that we all want to actualize and achieve in our lives. So let's take a look at the priestly blessings, because we're so familiar with it. Now, we know that people use the priestly blessings when they bless their kids on Friday night or on the holidays, or a lot of times you'll go to a bar mitzvah or a wedding and the rabbi will bestow the priestly blessing. This is the most commonly used formula of blessing known to the Jewish people. And it was originally bestowed by Aaron on the Jews when they finished building the tabernacle. And then God said, so shall you command the children of Aaron that they should bless the Jewish people. And interestingly, Va'ani avarachem. God says, when you bless the Jewish people, I will bless them, meaning the blessing will come on high, from on high, and you will be the facilitators to deliver this blessing to the Jewish people. So it's in chapter 6 of the book of Numbers, and it starts with verse 22. And there's so much to be said about this and so much commentary, but let's just focus on a couple of ideas, and after this class, you could read more about it, because there's so much more to be said, obviously, about these priestly blessings. But let me just start with a little story, actual true story I once heard. There was this religious man, a Hasidic Jew actually in Jerusalem, who had a child who was born with a neurological problem. And this father took a great interest in his child's medical care, and brought him, this daughter of his, to every doctor known and got the best possible treatment. And this daughter, she used to have seizures, and he managed to help her overcome it, in large measure. And one day there was a conference, an international conference taking place in Jerusalem with neurosurgeons. And this father got permission to attend, to listen, to learn the latest that's going on in this field, to know what's out there to help his daughter. And he sat through the conference, and one of the speakers at the conference was a religious Jew who came from America. And he went over to him to talk to him. He told him his story as a daughter. And he asked him, where are you going to be for Shabbat? He said, I'm going to be in the hotel. He said, why don't you come to my house to be my guest Friday night? I'd love to host you. So that's what they did. They met in Shul on Friday night, and they walked home, this doctor visiting from the States to this Hasidic Jew's home. On the way home, he was talking about his daughter, and he was saying how well his daughter is doing, that it's undiscernible. You don't even know she has this neurological issue. And he said, I'll tell you what, you'll be at my home Friday night. I have a lot of kids. He had like 9 kids. He said, you don't know which daughter it is. I have like 6 daughters. I'm not going to tell you which daughter suffers from this neurological condition. Let's see if after the meal you could tell me who it was, if you could figure it out. So the challenge was on. He came to the home. They sat through the whole dinner. At the end of the dinner, when he walked him out the door, he said, did you figure out which daughter it was? He says, yeah. He points. He says, that daughter. He gives her name. He said, you're right. How did you figure it out? There's nothing about her behavior that would give it away. How did you figure it out? So the doctor said, I'll tell you how I figured it out. The custom is in Jewish homes that after the father makes Kiddush, he sings the Eshet Chayil, the song about the woman of valor for the wife. And then each of the children come up to the father to get a blessing. And the father puts his hands on his child's head and gives the priestly blessing. So he said, I listened to you give the priestly blessing to every one of your children. And when that daughter came up, I felt that you were saying the blessing with more emotion. That's how I knew she was the daughter who suffers from this neurological condition. Because you had more feeling, more empathy in your prayer as you blessed that daughter. So the priestly blessing has been used for thousands of years, not just by Kohanim, but by every Jew to bless their children, to bless their family members. So obviously it's a very powerful blessing. And there are a lot of questions about this blessing. The first question is, why was it assigned to the Kohanim to give this blessing? Second question is, if God is giving the blessing anyways, and the Kohanim are just facilitating the blessing, why doesn't God just give the whole blessing directly? Why do we need the Kohanim to raise their hands and bless the Jewish people? And the third question is, there's something very unique about this blessing. You know, every mitzvah needs intention. And there's a whole debate in the Talmud. What's if you didn't have intention? You're lighting Shabbos candles, but you were thinking about something else. You weren't thinking about the mitzvah. You're putting on tefillin, you were thinking about your work. Did you still do the mitzvah if you did the deed without intention? And the answer is, by and large, yes. If you did the deed, it's not the same. The Talmud says a mitzvah without intention, without kavanah, is like a body without a soul. It's lacking the soul of the mitzvah, but you still did it. But there's one mitzvah, which is the command to the priestly blessing, where when the Kohanim recite the blessing, as we just did on Shavuot, to bless the Jewish people, they add one word, be ahava, with love. Meaning, not only do you have to do it with intention, but the motivation for the blessing has to come from a place of love. And the question is why? Why this mitzvah is the only mitzvah that a criteria and a prerequisite for doing the mitzvah is that not only you have intention, but you have a motivation of love when you give the blessing. Why? And so the commentaries discuss all of these questions. And here are some of the answers. One answer is that the Kohanim are the sacred people. They serve in the temple. Since they serve in the temple, they're the most fit to bless the Jewish people. They're the spiritual leaders and the eyes of the nation. Second answer is a very practical answer. The Kohanim had no land in Israel. They were supported by the Jewish people who gave crop, who gave shears, who gave offerings, truma, tithes to the Kohanim to support their families. Therefore, it was in the interest of the Kohanim to bless the Jewish people that they should be prosperous, because the more prosperous they are, the more they would receive tithes and offerings. So therefore, they were motivated to give this blessing to the Jewish people. But perhaps there's yet another answer why the Kohanim are the ones that are designated. And that is that the first Kohen to give the blessing to Jewish people was Aaron, the high priest. When the Jews built the tabernacle, it says Aaron raised his hands to the Jewish people and he blessed them with a priestly blessing, meaning that it was a spontaneous blessing. Where did it come from? It came from love for the Jewish people. As the rabbis say, be like the disciples of Aaron who love peace and pursue peace, love people. Aaron was a lover of people, and so he spontaneously blessed the Jewish people. And so therefore the Torah is telling us that the descendants of Aaron are the one that should bless the Jewish people, because they have that love genetically in their DNA from their ancestor Abraham. And a blessing has to be given with love. And that's why the law is that if a Kohen doesn't love the congregation or any Jew in the congregation, he can't bless, because blessing can only be delivered where there is love. But there's another way to read the verse. Not that God commanded the Kohanim to bless with love, but God, out of his love for the Jewish people, commanded the Kohanim to bless us. Meaning it's not the Kohanim's love, it's God's love that triggered the commandment that they should bless us, because God wants to deliver the blessing. But God needs a vessel. And therefore the vessel is the Kohanim. Why? Because the Kohanim are people who love peace and love. And therefore, to be a vessel for God's blessing, you have to be nullified. Meaning, if you're self-absorbed, then there's a blockage in the channel of God's blessing to the Jewish people. By the Kohen being all about love, he allows God's love and blessing to reach. He allows God's love and blessing to reach the Jewish people by being a person who loves the Jewish people and wants to bestow this blessing, and therefore he could be a conduit for the blessing to reach to the Jewish people. And so that is why the Kohanim are the ones that are able to deliver this blessing to the Jewish people. We also find this with Isaac, that when Isaac wanted to bless Esau, he said, go prepare me a meal as I love, and then I'll bless you. Why? Because he wanted to deliver a blessing from a place of love. He said, when you will go and prepare me a meal, and I'll see the way you honor your father, I will feel tremendous love for you for being such a good son. I'll see your virtues, I'll see your goodness, and that will facilitate a greater blessing. The blessing will come with greater intensity, with greater force. And this is a great secret in life, that if you want to be a blessing to someone, A lot of times we bless people and say, why didn't my blessing come true? And the answer is that you have enough love in your blessing. The more love, the more you care about the person, the more you love the person. That's why you're very good at it. Sometimes people give you advice in life. And sometimes you get conflicting advice. One person tells you to do this, one person tells you that. So how do you decide who to listen to? So the Lubavitcher Rebbe once said that always listen to the person who loves you the most, because their advice will be the best advice. Now, obviously, if one's an expert in the field and one's not an expert in the field, you should listen to the expert. But if two people with equal expertise and knowledge give you different, diverging advice, go with the person who loves you more. Because the more a person loves you, the greater source of blessing they will be to you. And this is the meaning of the priestly blessing and the insistence that it must be given with love. Not only the love of the Kohanim, but it's given with God's love. But in order to facilitate that blessing, the Kohanim themselves have to be in a state of love for the Jewish people in order to be able to transmit that blessing to be able to transmit that blessing to the Jewish people. Another subject that I would like to dwell on in this week's Torah portion is the idea of a Nazir, a Nazirite. And there's two very important ideas. The first one is the Nazir says, I'm going to abstain from worldly pleasures. And this is allowed voluntarily, either for a permanent or an extended period of time or a short period. And the question is, how does the Torah view this person? So on the one hand, the Torah says he's holy. He designated himself to be holy to God, to abstain from worldly pleasures. That sounds like he's righteous, like he's a saint. On the other hand, it says when he completes the days of his Nazirut, he has to bring an atonement, a sin offering. The question is, why does he have to bring a sin offering? He did something righteous by being holy to God. And part of the clue to this answer is the fact that the story of the Nazir, the Nazirite, follows the story of the Sota, the wayward woman, who's been suspected of being engaged in an adulterous affair, a relationship. She was told not to isolate herself with a certain man. She was seen going behind closed doors with that man. And our rabbis say something very profound and insightful. Our rabbis say, when a person sees the power of the evil inclination of the animal soul, that a woman can go for a momentary pleasure and sabotage and wreak havoc on her marriage and her family and destroy the peace and harmony in her home and violate her pledge and oath of marriage, person realizes that the forces of lust and temptation and desire are so powerful. They realize that they need to restrict themselves and confine themselves and take charge of their inner discipline and therefore take an oath of Nazirut. In other words, the normal course, as Maimonides says in life, is the Shvil Hazav, the middle way. Maimonides says the right course in life is not to be an extreme in either way. God made pleasures, and you should enjoy them. And you should enjoy the pleasures in a permissible, permitted, justified way. But when a person loses control and they become too indulgent to the point that they bring great harm upon themselves and their family, when a person witnesses that, they realize that I need to get more control in my life. And if you feel you may not have the full control, you need to now take a vow of abstinence of worldly pleasures to rein in your urges, your instincts, your desires, your lusts, to make sure that you are in control and you do not become a victim of your inner passions and drive like this woman, the Sota woman, did. And so therefore, what the rabbis are saying is that it's a balance. Ideally, a person should go on the middle road. But if they've succumbed to the weaknesses of the temptation, then they need to go to the other extreme. A good example is if you have a piece of paper and you fold it. If you have a piece of paper and you fold it, and now when you open it up, it keeps on going back. So you have to fold it to the other extreme so that now it can come back to the middle and be straight again. Same thing, if a person leans too far in one direction, sometimes they have to go to the other extreme to get back to the middle. A great example of this would be addiction, right? A healthy person could have a drink of alcohol on Shabbos, say l'chaim, right? But the Nazir can't have any alcohol. He's like a guy who's in AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. Why? Because he's gone too far into the mode of indulgence. He became an alcoholic. He became addicted to substances. And now he has to go far off to the other extreme that he can't even have a drop of wine on his lips. Why? Because he has to take the preventive course. And the same thing is true in life, that God gave us so many pleasures. And he gave it to us because he wants us to enjoy it. Why would God make the fruit of the vine pleasurable if he didn't want man to enjoy it? He didn't make it for the angels. He made it for us human beings to enjoy wine. And not only that, we sanctify Shabbat at every holy occasion with a cup of wine. But if a person has lost their self-control, that they now are becoming addicted to that substance to the point that it controls them, they're no longer the master over it, now they have to abstain. So yes, the Nazir did something holy, righteous. He wants to remove himself from the physical world because he doesn't want the grips of the world to control him. But it's unfortunate that he came to that stage in the first place. And therefore, when he finishes his rehabilitation, his period of abstinence, he brings an offering to atone. But there's one other point, and that is, we know there's a concept of taking vows, nidarim. Nidarim means you take a vow. I could take a vow not to do a certain deed or eat a certain food. I could take a vow not to eat meat, not to eat bread, whatever I want. A vow is binding in Jewish law. On the one hand, it looks like a Nazir is a form of a vow. I'm taking a vow. I'm not going to drink wine. I'm not going to cut my hair. How is it different than any other vow? And the answer is it the object or the subject? When it comes to a vow, I'm saying this object is forbidden to me. It's not about me. It's about the object that I've put off limits. When it comes to Nazir, it's about the person saying, I am a holy person. And because I'm holy, automatically I won't engage in this deed or this action or this activity. And this is a general rule in life. There's two ways to raise kids, for example, or ourselves. One is, I don't do that. That's forbidden. That's off limits. That's like a vow. This thing is bad. The other way to do it is not that that thing is bad, is that I am so precious because I have a godly soul that that thing is beneath me. I won't do that because, as in Yiddish they say, it's pashness. It's not appropriate for me because of who I am. So it's not that that thing necessarily is bad. It's just that I value myself and my dignity and my worth too much to engage in that. So it's not about the object, it's about raising up the subject. And the same thing in life, we could send a message to ourselves or to others that certain things are bad or certain things are just not fit for you because of who you are. You should be better than that, as they say. And that is the idea of being holy. When you understand that you are holy, why? Because you're in the image of God. Maybe certain behaviors in life aren't inherently bad, but is it appropriate for you? Certain things are bad. Certain things are evil. But certain things they're not bad, but they're not appropriate for my level of who I am. If I understand that I am a human being who was created in God's image and I reflect the holiness of God, therefore this behavior, this act is beneath me. And I think this applies to a lot of gray areas of life that someone can say, well, what's wrong with it? Or certain conversations maybe, or certain other activities that maybe aren't inherently bad, but I as a human being in the image of Hashem with a godly soul could do so much better than that. I could find behaviors that are much more appropriate, are much more suitable for me. And therefore, I will not do it because I've raised myself up to a higher level. We mentioned that the reason the Torah portion is so lengthy is because it talks about each of the 12 tribes for 12 consecutive days bringing the offerings to God. And the rabbis talk about this at great length because we know that in general the Torah is very concise and precise. The Torah doesn't add an extra word. And if you study Talmud, you know that sometimes from one extra letter, let alone an extra word, the Talmud learns many laws. Surely we're talking about maybe an extra 100 verses or many, many extra verses, dozens of extra verses. You could have just said on day one, this tribe brought these offerings. The first day happened to be the tribe of Judah, Nachshon, the son of Aminadab. He was the one who jumped into the sea when the sea split because of him. And the Torah could have just said that in all the subsequent 12 days, these and these tribes brought it without repeating it because they all brought identical gifts. And so there's a lot of discussion about why it's repeated 12 times. And I want to share just some of the ideas. The first idea is that, a lot of life is repetition. Now, there's two problems with repetition. The first problem with it is it could be boring. I did this yesterday. I did this the day before. Why do I have to do it again and again? Second problem is you may think, well, if I've done this so many days in a row, it's not new, it's not innovative, it's not exciting, it's not revolutionary. What's the great accomplishment? I'm just repeating same old, same old. And here the Torah is trying to tell us something, that every day a different tribe brought the same identical gifts. But to God, each one was as precious as though it was the first time it was ever given. I use a simple analogy. Do you ever get tired of your spouse telling you, I love you? They may have told it to you for 10 years, for 20 years, every day, multiple times a day. You heard it hundreds of thousands of times. But you'll never say, you know what, honey, can't you be original? You've said that to me so many times. Or if you tell your children you love them, or your children tell you they love you, you never tire of hearing it. Each time is like the first time. And therefore, the Torah is saying is when we pray to God, we should realize that God never tires of our prayers. Every day, it's like the first one. Second message is that while each tribe brought the identical gift, and externally, when you looked at it, you said they're all doing the same thing. But every human being is different. Just like no two people look alike, no two people think alike. And therefore, no two people feel alike. And therefore, every person brings it with their own unique devotion and feelings. And that's a very important lesson in life. Don't think just because two people did the same thing, in God's eyes, they're equal. Everyone brings their own feelings, their own experience, their own level of devotion and heartfelt love. And therefore, to God, each one is one of a kind. You could come into shul, there could be 100, 200 people praying the same words, singing the same song, but no two people are feeling the same thing. The same thing is true in our own lives. The way I pray today may be the same words as what I prayed yesterday, although I can change and add words. But the set words are the set words. But today I pray as a new person, new experiences. Every day is a different day. No 2 days are the same. And therefore, we shouldn't be discouraged and say, well, it's all the same. It is not new. It's not novel. It's old. No, to God, every day is as precious as the first day it was given. And God desires to hear our prayers each and every day as though it was given for the very first time. The last verse of this week's Torah portion says, after the tabernacle was erected, Moses came into the tent of meeting and he would hear the voice of God speak to him. And where would the voice of God emanate when God spoke to Moses in the tabernacle, in the Holy of Holies, from upon the ark where the tablets were contained, mibein shnei ha'kruvim, from between the two cherubim, vayidaber elav, God spoke to him. The voice of God specifically emanated from between the cherubim on top of the ark. And here we have a very powerful lesson. If you want to hear God's voice in your life, if you want God to speak to you, if you want God to communicate to you, it can only come from between the two cherubim. What are the cherubim? Those angelic forms, which our rabbis say were male and female facing one another. And this applies not only in marriage, but in every relationship. When people are looking at each other, communicating with each other, speaking into each other, not at each other, but into each other, that's where God's voice resonates. And that's where God's voice can be heard. And once again, the Torah is connecting this whole subject of peace and God's presence. God is dwelling in the tabernacle. And Moses is able to hear the voice of God, but only when there's peace and there's harmony, when people are looking at each other. And that's one of the ideas of the priestly blessing. That The last verse says, may God lift his eyes towards you and grant you peace. Sometimes people you love hurt you, disappoint you, and you want to look away. And God says, lift your eyes, look them in the eye, and restore the harmony, restore the peace. The shalom, not just shalom in the sense of peace that we live separate and different lives and don't interact, but the interconnected peaceful life, where each one is completing the other and making the other one whole. There's a story, I think they say, about Issa Zalman Meltzer, that his wife once had pain in her leg, and they went to the doctor, and he took his wife to the doctor. When the doctor took them into the room, the doctor said to the rabbi, what's the issue? He said, my wife's leg is hurting us. So the Torah tells us we have to become one. We have to realize that we are interconnected with one another. On the one hand, it's not so. Each person is elevated, unique, one of a kind, raised up. And everyone's value and importance is equal to the next. On the other hand, we're all one, shalom. We shall make each other shalom. And in order for any society to function properly, that's what we need. We need not only to be a blessing to each other and protect each other. God should then shine his face towards us and be gracious to us. Shining face is a smile, love, and grace and kindness. But ultimately, when there is hurt and there is disappointment and there is betrayal and anger, we should overcome that anger and be able to look at each other and restore the harmony and the peace by making peace and by granting forgiveness to one another. At this point, if anyone has any questions, please type them into the box or unmute yourself and we'll address any questions. Again, thank you all for participating in today's class. And does anyone have any questions or comments?
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you for coming on and for studying Torah today. And
Thank you, Rabbi Scheiner.
Thank you for coming on. It's great to study with everyone. And may God grant us peace individually in our personal lives, in our families, in our community, and society today. May we be granted shalom, and that peace is, of course, through elevating our love for one another, which will draw down more of Hashem's blessings for all of us. So thank you again, and wish everyone a wonderful day and a Shavua Tov to everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, Amen. Shavua Tov.
All the best.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you all for coming on. It's always a pleasure to study Torah with you.
Thank you.
It's always a pleasure to hear you.
Thank you. Shavua Tov.
I wanted to thank you, Rabbi, also because during my life I've been asked that question if I believe in Jesus and being the Son of God, and now you've given me a great answer to that question.
That's right.
So
every human being is a son or daughter of God, for sure.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.